Hello and welcome to the debate. I'm your host Sana Makbool with you at PTV World. In today's show, we will be taking a look at two important stories. The first is in reference to what has happened in terms of the terrorist activities that have spiked across the Pakistan-Afghanistan border, in which 3 Pakistani soldiers have been martyred in exchange of fire across this border in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa's Kurram district on Tuesday. This has been confirmed by ISPR, and of course we have known that we have talked about the spike in terrorist activities in various parts near the border before as well, especially since the Afghan Taliban took control in Afghanistan, and there was reports of regrouping of terrorist activities within the country. We have of course asked the Afghan Taliban in Afghanistan to not let their soil be used against any other territory. We've also asked for their facilitation in terms of dialogue with the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, but unfortunately we've seen that the terrorist activities have continued, and there hasn't been much control in terms of the border activities and also within Afghanistan. According to reports, the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan have claimed responsibility for this particular attack. In the statement by the ISPR, of course, it has been said that all of the soldiers had fought with a lot of courage and they embraced a martyrdom in the exchange of fire, and that Pakistani army soldiers will continue to sacrifice for the defense of their motherland. The foreign minister also expressed his grief over the martyrdom of these soldiers and reiterated the stance that Pakistan needs to put forward to Afghanistan in terms of the regime in Afghanistan to not allow their soil be used against any other territory. So that's going to be our first segment today, and we're going to be focusing on our response to such terrorist activities and what are we going to do in light of the Afghanistan Taliban regime, and then how exactly is this border mechanism going to be dealt with them. We're going to also be taking a look in our second segment at the updates regarding the flood situation. Of course, we know that more than 1/3 of the country and more than 33 million people have been affected in various parts of Sindh, Balochistan, Khyber Pakhtunkhwa and elsewhere. We've also seen that the sufferings of human beings keep on increasing as there is more forecast of rain in various parts of Sindh and other areas of the country as well. And because of this, there seems to be a possibility of increase in the suffering of the human population who's already been affected by these devastating floods. There are numerous estimates that keep on coming as the situation progresses, and as we see when the water levels are receding, what sort of damages have occurred. It's going to still be evolving, and we're going to find out eventually after a couple of months the scale of the loss and damage. But of course the initial estimates are also huge, and we require all the massive appeal that we can from an international community. So we're going to be taking a look at the current situation with regards to the flood in light of new forecasts and in light of the current situation regarding the people who are still suffering from being homeless, from losing their loved ones, and also in the light of food insecurity issues and the spread of waterborne diseases. That's going to be our second segment of the show today. For this and more, as always, I've been joined in the studios by senior analyst Farooq Patafi. And for our first segment regarding the terrorist activities and the recent exchange of fire in which 3 army soldiers lost their lives, we've been joined online by Brigadier Retired Mr. Rashid Wali Janjua, Director Research, IPRI, and Mr. Mushtaq Yusufzai, who's a senior journalist who's joined us on telephone line. Brigadier Rashid, well, I'll start with you. When we take a look at, of course, the kind of terrorist activities that have increased over the recent months, we've of course seen that Pakistan has continued to reiterate that we do not, we of course want the kind of support that we need from the Afghan Taliban, and we do not want the soil to be used against Pakistan or any other territory for that matter. However, we've seen that unfortunately the kind of assistance or the kind of help that we need in terms of the control of the terrorist groups within Afghanistan, or to ensure this commitment that the soil is not going to be used against any other territory, has not been given. On top of that, there has been efforts made in terms of increasing dialogue once again with the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, who also have elements within Afghanistan, and this particular attack has also been claimed responsibility by them. But we've seen, of course, that at the end of the day, that doesn't seem to be going forward as well. Firstly, your comments on the recent attack and the martyrdom of the 3 army soldiers, and then what exactly needs to be our immediate response to these activities, because while we speak about dialogue and while we speak about the Taliban regime in Afghanistan not letting their soil be used against any other territory, the current situation says otherwise.
Yes, it's a bit disconcerting to find that after having launched 1,237 kinetic operations and having killed 18,000 terrorists, uh, there is again a resurgence of TTP. And we also know that from January to April, we lost 97 of our troops to these terrorists. And after that, you know, this latest resurgence, it does not bode well for the security of the region. And I think the immediate response should be to redeploy, re-establish all those checkposts which were removed, and to perhaps remilitarize the area, because it appears that the frontier corps troops, though they are putting up valiant fight, they are in need of help, because the areas from which these attacks are coming, these incursions are happening, are in the close vicinity of the military bases. So that's a bit disconcerting, though there was a statement that these terrorists and the TTP elements, they are not in that large size and they are away from the population centers. But still, to me, we need to put our finger in the dike at the right moment. Otherwise, an expanding torrent would engulf the entire region into the same militancy that we experienced in 2007. And we know it's happening in Swat, Kabul, Mata, it happened in Kuram. There is a resurgence of criminal activity in and around Kohat also. There was a
Right.
grenade attack. And all this does not bode well for the situation. And I think some elements have managed to cross and they are trying to regroup and start their terrorist activities. The state response should be very strong, very prompt.
Absolutely, absolutely, Brigadier Saab. I'm so glad that you mentioned, removal of checkposts because that was a surprising development. Who do you think should be responsible for that? Should we be questioning it? Because it seems that suddenly we removed a lot of checkposts, and that might have actually created a kind of vacuum that is now being used by TTP.
It was not only checkpost, what it was the whole demilitarization plan, which
Yeah.
perfect sense, because after a very long insurgency, uh,
Yeah.
counterinsurgency operations, there was a need to hand over the area to the civil administration and the frontier
No, no,
corps.
but sir, that has been happening for years. This decision of withdrawing all the checkposts actually was recently done within past few months actually, right? Am I wrong?
Yes, you're right, and I think it was in response to both government's demands, people's demands, because people were, especially the IDPs who wanted to resettle and start the normal life, they were quite jari and suspicious and inconvenienced by these checkposts. But that was the purpose behind removing. But I think the stage has come that those checkposts should be again redeployed, reinstalled, and the troops moved, and wherever the army elements are required, they should frontier corps element should be beefed up immediately, and these militants which have managed to cross should be flushed out immediately before they create a momentum of their own and establish themselves.
Right, absolutely. But I also do want to talk about how we're going to reconcile that with the dialogue that is, of course, also looming and our efforts towards that. But let me come back to that later. Let me just speak to Mr. Mushtaq Yousafzai with regards to this particular attack and, of course, the context in which we see the increase in these terrorist activities. There's a lot of role that we have had in the past regarding the Afghan Taliban and what exactly can they do in terms of facilitation and dialogue, as well as in terms of protecting Pakistan and other territories from their soil and that being used against them. But it seems that either they are not willing or not capable to deal with the kind of terrorist threats that emanate from within Afghanistan, especially when we talk about the Tehrik-e-Taliban as well and other terrorist groups within Afghanistan. Moving forward, can we really take this into the conversation, into our efforts, considering that we haven't really had any sort of help or any sort of result because of their association or because of their involvement in this. Do you think that there is a possibility that Pakistan can completely take out the role of the Afghan Taliban from this conversation and manage their own response to these terrorist activities?
And Mushtaq Yusufzai Sahab, could you also shed some light on the recent reports regarding, certain office bearers of an international telephony company actually being kidnapped?
We have started this in the past as well on this forum that in Pakistan, some of the people had very, high hopes from the Afghan Taliban that when they come into power, they will defeat, they will crush the Pakistani militants, and there will be peace in Afghanistan. That didn't happen. What the Taliban could do, the Afghan Taliban could do, they actually brought these people to the table and they facilitated the peace talk between Pakistan and the Pakistani Taliban. And there were a number of sessions. Then the tribal elders were involved, and some of the elders were sent, I think, more than 3 times. Then ulama, the clerics were sent from Karachi and Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, and then they negotiated with the Pakistani Taliban. And I think there was some very considerable progress in the peace talks. And most of the issues were almost resolved, but there were 2 hurdles in the peace talk. The Taliban wanted to return Pakistan with the arms, with their guns. And then they were opposing the Pata merger because there are 7 tribal districts and they are now part of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, and that is called Pata merger. So unfortunately, some elders, the tribal elders who were sent to the Taliban in a Jirga, they also didn't want the Pata merger because their interests are not being served now. So there were 2 major issues. And when the clerics were sent, then they almost resolved this one issue. And one of the leading clerics told me that he himself asked the Taliban that if you want peace and you want to come to Pakistan, then why you are insisting to come with the guns? Because you are not fighting, you are not coming for fighting. And
Right.
that was possible that the Taliban could withdraw from this one, demand. But unfortunately, with the regime change in Pakistan, there's almost now silence. And the Taliban, you can say, are now frustrated because they were hoping they will come back and there will be peace agreement with the Pakistani government, and then they will return. What Pakistan did is they actually gave some opportunities in the ceasefire that some of them managed to cross the border and they came to Pakistan with their guns. Now they are almost in Malakand, Mata, Swat, Puchar, Bajawar, Mohmand, Bunair. So most of these people have returned to their previous station in Pakistan, and you see that they started, target killing of the police, paramilitary, frontier corps, frontier constabulary, and now they started attacks on the peace committee members in Swat. And now I'm talking to you, another tribal elder is just killed in the Kolak village of Swat near Charbagh. So it's very unfortunate that Swat was almost cleared of the militants in 2009, and nobody could even dare to come out with their gun. And now they are patrolling everywhere outside Mangora. And as you asked me about the kidnapping of 7 Grenadier employees, it's true. And the Taliban have confirmed it. And even I asked the Taliban that, these are not soldiers, they are not part of the government. So it's not good to kidnap these people. Then who will come to help these people to invest in this country?
But I want to understand 2 things. One, when you talk about considerable progress being made, it doesn't seem so, considering that 2 important factors that you have highlighted still remain, and we're nowhere closer to actually reaching any sort of a conclusion with regards to these 2 important factors. And if we don't, are we still going to continue with the dialogue and try to reach a conclusion which hasn't happened so far and keep having these terrorist attacks meanwhile? or are we going to look at a change of strategy? And then when you talk about the resurgence, of course, this means that there was something within the way that things were handled which allowed for this resurgence to happen. So even if we talk about ceasefires, they seem to have this as a counter issue which seems to emerge. So how do we deal with that?
Actually, the Taliban utilized ceasefire for their interest, and they managed to send their people from Afghanistan to Pakistan, and now they are everywhere with the guns left behind the Americans. The Pakistani Taliban got very good weapon, and now they have modern weapon, left behind by the American troops. They purchased from the Afghan security forces. So one cannot hope the Taliban, because what the Taliban could do in Afghanistan, they just arranged this meeting. They will never ever use any force against the Pakistani Taliban. They will never ever ask them to leave Afghanistan, because Pakistani Taliban is the fact that they are more than 5,000 fighters, and the Afghan Taliban are not in a position to confront them, because they are already engaged in their fighting in Panjshir, and then they are worried about the Islamic State. So they will never ever like to create another enemy within the same country. Now, if we talk about the peace talks, I think once we have started the negotiation, we should have continued. And then if there were hurdles, we should have told the nation that, we initiated the peace process, we were quite clear, we were sincere, and now the Taliban have these demands which are unrealistic. So what should we do? And then the parliament is there. But in Pakistan, this is the dilemma that nobody actually owns these type of things. We leave it to the military and
Right,
the political
okay.
leadership. Yeah.
All right. Farooq, you've been quite vocal in terms of your stance on dialogue with the terrorist groups, including Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan. But as
Against them.
Yes, against it. And when we talk about the kind of resurgence that Mr. Yousafzai was talking about in areas that apparently have been so-called cleared of terrorist organizations or terrorists, we see that that's happening again. My question is, when we talk about the way forward, it seems that if dialogue is not taking us anywhere, but then has military action in terms of actually clearing certain areas of terrorist groups ensured or guaranteed the fact that that's not going to happen again?
Right, Sana, and thank you very much for this question, because I've been, pressure has been building up as I was listening to other participants, and I wanted to say something. For past 25 years, I've been churning out opinion on what I think can be done to improve the quality of life in Pakistan. But suddenly, three paradoxes have hit me so hard that I don't know how to actually find a solution. One, Afghanistan and Afghanistan-related insurgency or law and order situation on our border, right? Because I don't see any solution of what is happening in Afghanistan. And then the second one is these floods, and the third one, our economy. Because suddenly they have escalated so fast that even imagination breaks down, right? But I'm going to talk about Afghanistan because that was your question, and it was essentially about TTP. And my humble submission repeatedly has been that every time you have conceded some ground or some kind of, engaged them in dialogue, every time they have regrouped, they have regained space, and they have actually started or actually have doubled down on attacking you, right? It has been consistently happening since Shakai and Sara Roha. In Sawat also we saw similar kind of situation, and later on as well, whenever you engage them. Now, my question is that we already knew that Afghanistan is a paradox, and Afghan Taliban are not going to put that kind of pressure on TTP to actually just surrender their weapons and become civilian parts of the system. Then why is it that all of a sudden we conceded so much space? Negotiations were still going on. They were demanding one thing, that reversal of Fatah, right? What does that mean? They wanted to bear arms while actually moving around within Khyber Pakhtunkhwa's while Fatah region. And at this moment, they are bearing their arms already. And then we talk about these checkposts causing inconvenience to the locals, but it is not a choice of having any checkpost or not having a checkpost. It is a choice between having a checkpost of Pakistan Army or Pakistan Armed Forces or TTP's checkpost, right? So why would we actually do it? I don't know whether it was a carry forward, some kind of momentum generated by the previous PTI government or something else, but somehow we kept on conceding the space even when this government came in. And now you see that they are actually reasserting themselves and they are making life difficult. So one, should we not only, there are three things that I actually want to highlight and demand. One, take action, immediate action, right? Although our forces are now committed elsewhere, so the kidnapping that I was talking about took place yesterday in Sawat. But Sawat is also flooded and army is also busy in rescue and relief efforts, right? But even if that is, you need action, you'll have to take action. That is one thing. Secondly, ask questions, why did this happen, right? And the third thing, for heaven's sake, for once, after repeating the same mistake over and over, learn something, so draw some lessons out of this. Because, I mean, the way Pakistani blood is spilled every day, it is sad. I mean, you say that they are soldiers and they are combatants, but they are our soldiers. And why are we actually allowing them to die in this manner by conceding so much space to the terrorists? These are questions that need answer. And I hope that one day when the parliament wakes up, it also actually debates these things, because recently it actually was supporting the idea of holding dialogue with the of the TTP.
Absolutely.
Why was it happening?
It was. Right. Brigadier Rashid Njua, Brigadier Rashid Wali, when we talk about what is happening in terms of the kind of terrorist activities that exist and what we've seen before in our efforts of dialogue, is the lesson drawn that we should not engage in dialogue again and that we should ditch this effort towards having any sort of negotiations with the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan? Because so far we haven't really seen results. And if that is so, then what is the option that we have? Is complete military action going to resolve this issue once for all?
Yes, my answer is that we should resort to the military action, because nothing will stop this ingress other than a resolute counter-insurgency operation. And while we go for that, we should also ensure that we should strengthen our borders. All the border control measures that we earlier took, those should be further beefed up. And at the same time, at the diplomatic level, though we know that there is a capacity deficit and maybe a willingness deficit amongst the Afghan government to control their ideological kinsmen, but we should exert a very strong diplomatic pressure on them to stop TTP from moving around with impunity inside Afghanistan, using Afghan territory as sanctuary, and accompanied with that, our response should be absolutely resolute. And at the end of the day, if the terrorists are all flushed out, their complete area is sanitized of their presence, in future those tribes which belong to this area, those would only be allowed to come back and resettle after they agree to abide by the law of the land. And there should be no
But what's the
blanket amnesty according.
Rashid, what's the guarantee in that they will not recoup and they will not go back to the same activities?
Why would there not be any relapse, A? And secondly, you were talking about using diplomatic levers. Can you identify those levers? Because it seems to me that Afghanistan at this moment is so broken that nobody seems to have any kind of leverage whatsoever.
Even if we don't have much leverage, we are doing a lot on humanitarian front, on diplomatic front, exerting all kinds of moral suasions in front of international community to support Afghans, and it is well within our rights to impress upon them the need to control this menace, and we should exert all possible diplomatic pressure on that score.
All right, thank you very much, Brigadier Rashid Wali and Mr. Mushtaq Yousafzai for joining us. We'll take a short break and be right back. Welcome back to the debate. We're going to be talking about the devastating floods and the impact that they've had on more than one-third of the country and more than 33 million people. Of course, this devastation has been huge. It is a climate change catastrophe that Pakistan is facing, and millions of people are suffering because of it. There seems to be an understanding of how and when we're going to take a look at the assessment of the loss and damage after the recession of waters, but the scale at which Pakistan and its people are suffering is perhaps still not yet understood by the international community at the level that we need it to understand. There needs to be more help coming in terms of the kind of resources that are required, and also the kind of relief and rehabilitation activities that Pakistan will be requiring later on as well. Along with that, we of course have seen outbreaks of waterborne diseases, food insecurity issues, as a lot of agricultural output has been destroyed. And then we have of course seen the fact that so many people have lost their livelihoods in terms of livestock, have lost their loved ones, and are now suffering without any particular shelter and clean drinking water. This situation of course very dire, along with the special needs that women have, along with pregnant women and children, the elderly and sick. And so we need to be able to see more international help coming in, and what has been referred to as justice by the UN Secretary General as well. Farooq, we've of course seen the scale of devastation in the past and talked about at length of what needs to be done, both in terms of prior to these activities, these particular catastrophes, and also in terms of what we need to do after that. But then when we take a look at the kind of situation that currently exists, it seems that the way that we need the international community to understand is still not there. Before I come to that, let me also welcome in the debate Ms. Danielle Gurman, who's an editor and writer. Thank you very much, Danielle, for joining us. I hope I took your name correctly. Apologies if I did not. When we take a look at the situation in Pakistan, we really want the world to understand the scale of the damage that exists. In your understanding of how this particular catastrophe is being viewed, do you think that people understand what it means when we say that one-third of the country and more than 33 million people are currently affected?
Really understand exactly what's going on. I think, and this is no slight against Pakistan itself, I think there's just been a lot of probably risk aversion to the country over the years through a whole range of reasons, not, singling any one reason. And that's where I've always tried to present a Pakistan that beyond the media stereotype, that I have always experienced ever since my first visit there in 2007 and my 6 visits or 5 visits since then. So I'm a 6-time visitor. And I've often received pushback from what I've written about the country. So I just think generally that I don't think the world really gathers what's going on. And I think with everything else that's going on in the world, everyone's distracted with high inflation and even COVID still in some parts. And I just think people are a little bit overwhelmed with their own responsibilities even in their own daily lives.
Right, absolutely. And also with regards to the conversation around climate change, There's, of course, the visit of the UN Secretary General to Pakistan as well, and he spoke about the fact that when we take a look at global carbon emissions, Pakistan, of course, has only less than 1% to contribute, and there are members of the international community that contribute far more and therefore are far more responsible of what is going on around the world. And so what they need to do is to provide justice and not help. And this, of course, is a huge statement in terms of the accountability that one can put forward to the global north. But it seems that at the moment we're still talking about this catastrophe in terms of aid or help or humanitarian support, and the kind of action that we need is perhaps on a different level, which inculcates this accountability and responsibility. So I understand when you say that there's a lot that the attention is focused on at the moment, but then how do we bring in these factors and hold these countries responsible and accountable?
Well, I could talk about CSR, corporate social responsibility, and sustainability measures, which I think a lot of countries in the global north, as you refer to, they need regulatory measures. Well, often many of them do actually have regulatory bodies who oversee reporting of sustainability. But I think it needs to be even stepped up further. I think that needs to become more like a global body, a dedicated global body. As far as I'm aware, there isn't a dedicated global body dedicated to sustainability. I mean, obviously the United Nations are a player in that, but I think there definitely needs to be more done because, as you rightly point out, a country like Pakistan, and even from the part of the world that I'm from in the Pacific, you know, small islands like Fiji are bearing the brunt of climate change, and they have very low, relatively low carbon emissions. So it's the same in Pakistan as well. It's a very similar scenario as far as low output of carbon, relatively low per capita output of carbon emissions. Yet there's an absolute catastrophe at the moment, a humanitarian catastrophe that Pakistan is facing. And of course, Pakistanis will get through this. They're very resilient. And people, very, very resilient people, some of the most resilient people I've ever met on the planet, and also extraordinarily generous. I mean, generosity is, in some respects, in my opinion, you know, their middle name. But, you know, they need help. They need a lot of help, and there needs to be a lot more regulatory measures as far as reporting and sustainability goes, moving forward, looking forward to after this disaster dissipates.
Right. I'm glad that you brought up the situation of Fiji as well. And let us for a second forget this north-south divide and let us talk about the vulnerable countries because of the weather or climate situation. Do you think that all those countries that have recently suffered, maybe Japan, maybe other Asian countries, Germany also had floods. In Europe, we saw similar kind of incidents. All of them can come together at the UN and put pressure on other countries that might be contributing more and might actually be, taking less responsibility?
I think the whole world, practically every country that's able, that has institutions and civil society and institutional bodies, has a duty to actually to input to basically have institutions that govern global sustainability. And when we're talking about sustainability, it's not just directly environmental sustainability. I mean, sustainability covers a lot of. I mean, above all, today we're really talking about environmental sustainability, but there is a lot more to do with sustainability, which
Right.
does actually contribute to the well-being, going forward to a lot of people, not just.
I totally get that, and I understand that since Paris process started and now we are going to have another COP meeting in Egypt, we'll see some kind of responsibility being taken, or at least there will be some kind of pressure on these countries to take responsibility. But then you saw Donald Trump. One fine morning, he decides that his country is going to exit Paris Accord. These countries which are really successful, really accomplished, rich countries, they need consistent or persistent pressure as well. And there can be a campaign by the countries that are worst affected by climate change. Perhaps UN can be a good forum for that, where all these countries come together, form a kind of pressure block, and then demand some kind of justice.
And then there's, of course, also the contribution of the likes of Donald Trump in terms of bringing forth the issues regarding climate change as not being real. What does one do about that?
Yeah.
Well, when you have a climate change denier, I'm like flabbergasted is the word. I can't even understand it, because the science speaks for itself, the evidence speaks for itself. I can't even speak any further on that. Someone who was in a position to do so much good, reaped so much damage. But hopefully, moving forward on a more positive note, President Biden, I understand, has re-signed to the accord, if I'm not mistaken.
Right.
Yeah. They have joined again, but at this moment, one has to actually look at how the debate is going to be shaped, right? Perhaps if nobody else is going to take note, and there are going to be climate deniers everywhere, let us convert the flood-affected areas of Pakistan into a disaster theme park, so that they can come and actually see with their own eyes what exactly Pakistan has suffered through and what other countries are suffering as well. Is it not true?
And I think
we need that kind of intervention?
I think it's also to, I think probably the word I was looking for before was indifference. There seems to be some sort of indifference to human suffering, even currently inside Pakistan. Just an indifference to human suffering, as well as I say, on the outside Pakistan as well. There's just so many people just seem to be so overwhelmed by their daily life, and inflation is going up, and that I think just people are a little bit fatigued. But
right, and Danielle, of course, there is indifference on a larger scale as well, but of course the economic woes that the people of Pakistan or elsewhere are also facing are also real and are contributing to the kind of responses that one can put forward. When we talk about, of course, accountability, you earlier mentioned that there needs to be perhaps a body in terms of sustainability, and that the UN also, of course, exists at the moment regarding the SDGs. But then when we take a look at the kind of guarantees or implementation of certain factors regarding climate change or other issues, that doesn't seem to really exist. And when it comes to calling out the international community to be more responsible, there's just that, because it ends there. There is no way that we can actually ensure that some action does take place. So when we talk about another body existing, what sort of a role do you think it is going to play? Will it be able to ensure something? Because the current body hasn't, and so I don't understand the creation of another one.
I know, of course, just another body. However, I think that if there were a dedicated corporate social responsibility, sustainability body, I would see it as a unified body, but that oversees all countries that sign up to that sustainability, the reporting, and that it governs the entire reporting. Obviously, different countries have different needs. Like, as we just discussed, a country like, say, Fiji is simply not going to have the same output and environmental needs as a country like the United States. That the two are just not comparable. However, I see something like like a main governing body, such as the United Nations, that oversees, but simply in a corporate social responsibility context.
Right. Daniel, there's also, of course, the concern that Pakistan is obviously going to overcome this in a long time, the kind of damage that we have seen, and that there needs to be sustained support, especially in terms of rehabilitation and resilient structures being developed within the country. It seems that, obviously, in terms of what we're seeing right now and how it has happened in the past, we don't really see the kind of support that we need at the moment, and there's no real guarantee in terms of the financial or economic support that we're going to get later on. Can the world actually step up to that and fulfill our expectations considering our economic instability at the moment?
I wish the world would step up. There are so many people on the ground doing so much good work, and they're trying, obviously with challenges, trying to literally accessibility challenges, trying to get to certain parts of the country. I know Rotary are doing some amazing work. They are based in Karachi, that they are actually taking supplies and water and necessities actually to villages.
Right, and there are numerous other organizations also that are doing a lot. Unfortunately, we're out of time, but thank you very much, Daniel German, for joining us and being a part of the debate. Of course, Farooq, it seems that whenever we talk about the kind of support that we need from the international community, there is still something that we are not really seeing in terms of action on a global scale. How do we expect the support that we need in the next 5 to 10 years?
Right. I think that we can talk about that in coming days as well, because I understand that we are left with very little time. How much time?
You have your 2 minutes, don't
2
worry.
minutes. Okay, I'm going to set up my stopwatch, but I'm going to talk about something else a little bit more direct, right? The world should actually be helping Pakistan, and Pakistan should also be helping itself. But apart from that, there's something that actually rang a bell. When you were talking about climate deniers, my humble submission was it reminded me of something that was very, insightful. G.B. Shaw once said that the wrong kind of people keep on blaming circumstances for whatever they are. The right kind of people stand up and look for the circumstances they want. If they don't get them, they make them, right? And this is, this approach is needed to identify who is a climate denier and why. There's a beautiful book written by Arlington Hochschild. It is called Strangers in Their Own Land, right? In which she presents the case study of Louisiana, America's state, right? Where Louisiana's, bayou, the river, is so polluted that they cannot eat fish without removing the dead parts because it is toxic, right?
Wow.
So in that state, people still actually vote for the same conservative government. And there is a nexus between the religious right and the big business companies, and then of course these Republicans or the conservatives. What are they doing? They're actually promising or convincing people that there is a kingdom of heaven. So in that kingdom you will get whatever you want, and in this world you have to actually align with the right wingers who are being sponsored by the rich guys. So the question of corporate responsibility goes out of the window. First, you'll have to actually undo this nexus, not only in US but all over the world. Without that, you are doomed.
Absolutely, and we hope that that's not the case and that we're able to do better. That's all that we have from the debate. See you tomorrow.